despite the fact that, typically these are anonymous when you're using some type of software out there, like a Lattice or a Glint, for example, which are really great tools. I think Rona is right that when an organization doesn't take action on the feedback that's been provided and isn't transparent about the feedback that's being provided, then it creates some level of suspicion. Why are you collecting this information from me if you aren't even doing anything about it? Is there some witch hunt going on? But I would be so surprised if organizations were actually then tapping people on the shoulder and saying, well, I think you wrote this in this survey, because it means that they're not going to be able to give the survey again. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a tough situation, because employers genuinely want to improve the workplace for their employees, or I think most of them do. I'd like to think so anyway. But I can understand the sentiment people might have about it.
Yeah, and then Maria there, just her comment flashed across the screen about people need that sense of anonymity, but yeah, I think you're right. I think if you don't see things being acted on, then you're not going to take them very seriously. Indeed. So quite the situation. So let's move on to the situation room. I love that sound. It's so dramatic. Earth shaking things to discuss. Right. What's the situation this week?
Okay, so this is about red flags in a new workplace specifically. So there was a Reddit article that the folks over at Purple Acorn found, and they found plenty more, but this was one in particular about an individual who'd started at a new job. He or she immediately saw some red flags. There was a ton of attrition on the team. There was this toxic work environment going on where people constantly felt on edge with the leaders in the organization. People were being overworked, etc. So, the question that this individual had was, how do I explain to a new employer the reason for my short tenure? And so I think that this is a really interesting topic and super important for individuals to really think hard about when they are applying for a job. So, we talk about red flags, and there are some key ones to consider. The first is there a high turnover rate in the organization? Is there a toxic work environment? Would your boss potentially be a micromanager? Are employees overworked? Are they burned out? What's happening with raises and bonuses, or is the company doing well but employees aren't seeing any type of financial reward, or is there something like actually an ethical issue, like maybe bad business practices or harassment or discrimination? And there are some ways that an applicant can figure this type of information out. The first is in the job interview. Just as much as an employer is screening you to see if you're a good culture fit, you should be screening them to see if they are a good culture fit for you as well. And I recognize that can be hard to do in the job market that we're in, but at the end of the day, if you're super miserable and you're going to leave the job anyway, it doesn't look great to leave a job after a couple months and explain that to the next employer. So really think hard about this when you're going through the application process. But there are questions that you can ask in the interviews. With HR, with the boss, I would always recommend asking for a peer interview as well, to suss out, what's really going on here. So how would you define your culture? How would you describe your management style, or the management style of your manager? How often do you give pay raises? How's the company doing financially, if they're willing to provide that information? So that's one key thing, is just trying to screen out those red flags early on. But let's say that you get into a work environment, and despite your best efforts, guess what? There's still red flags to toxic work culture. They hit it from the interview process, or whatever happened.